Today, we're diving into a really fascinating legal battle. On one side, you have a city trying to regulate public morality, and on the other, you have this fundamental right to be let alone. This case gets right to the heart of a classic question. Where does the government's power end and our own personal liberty begin? So it all boils down to this one big question. Can a city government really dictate the terms of how a private business operates, who it can serve, and for how long, all in the name of morality? Let's take a look at how the courts tackled that. All right, let's set the stage. The whole conflict kicked off with a very specific action taken by the city of Manila, which was driven by an official policy to safeguard public morals. The story starts back in 1992. The city of Manila, led by Mayor Alfredo S. Lim at the time, passed something called Ordinance Number 7774. And this law had a very specific target: hotels, motels, and similar establishments. The stated goal? To protect public morality. And believe me, this law was specific. As you can see, it completely banned what it called short-time admission, which meant you couldn't rent a room for less than 12 hours. This got rid of those wash-up rates for people who just needed a room for a little while. And it even said you couldn't rent the same room out more than twice in a single day. Well, as you can probably guess, this new rule didn't go over well with everyone. The city's motel and hotel owners, they fought back immediately. They argued this wasn't just bad for their bottom line, it was a direct attack on their fundamental liberties. So, a group of these motel operators, including companies like White Light Corporation, decided to take the city to court. Their argument was pretty straightforward. They claimed the ordinance was an invalid, unconstitutional interference in how they ran their businesses. And this is really where the two sides clash. The city of Manila said, hey, this is just a valid exercise of our police power, the government's inherent authority to protect public health, safety, and morals. But the motel operators, they saw it completely differently. For them, this was an unreasonable overreach that was not only hurting their business, but more importantly, violating the privacy of their own customers. Now, this brought up a really interesting legal hurdle right at the start. Before the court could even get to the main issue, it had to answer this question. Does a business even have the right to sue on behalf of its customers? In legal terms, this is all about standing. And the court's answer was a clear yes. They allowed what's known as third-party standing. The court basically recognized that motels have a very close economic relationship with their patrons. And let's be real, it would be pretty hard for every single customer to go out and file their own lawsuit. So the court let the motels stand in and argue on behalf of their customers' right to privacy. Okay, so with that procedural question out of the way, the court could finally dig into the ordinance itself. And this wasn't going to be about anyone's personal opinion. It was about putting this law through a rigorous constitutional test. The key legal principle at play here is called substantive due process. Now, think of it like this. It's not enough for the government just to follow all the right steps when creating a law. This principle asks a much deeper question. Is the reason for the law itself fair and justified? It's a crucial shield against arbitrary government power. Now, you should know that courts don't look at all laws in the same way. For a basic economic regulation, they use a pretty low bar called the rational basis test. But when a law starts messing with a fundamental right, like the right to privacy, it has to clear the highest possible hurdle. That's called strict scrutiny. And that means the government has to prove not only that its goal is incredibly important, but that this law is the least restrictive, most narrowly tailored way to achieve that goal. And this is exactly where the whole case turns. The court decided that this ordinance wasn't just about business regulations. No, at its very core, it was about the fundamental rights to liberty and privacy. And that single decision instantly kicked the whole analysis up to that highest level of review, strict scrutiny. The court didn't mince words either. It made its position crystal clear with this powerful quote from the decision. It framed the right to privacy not as some minor detail, but as the very beginning of all freedom. That really tells you just how seriously the court was taking this issue. So how exactly did the ordinance fail this strict test? Well, the court found it was simply overbroad. It even called it a blunt and heavy instrument. Think about it. In its effort to stop potentially immoral acts, the law also punished a whole bunch of perfectly legitimate activities. What about a family that needs a room for just a few hours during a power outage? Or a traveler who needs a quick place to rest between flights? The ordinance made no distinction. The court pointed out that it punished everyone indiscriminately and that there were better, more targeted ways to deal with the issue, like focused police work. It was just too clumsy to be constitutional. So, after going through all the facts, sorting out the legal standing, and applying these tough constitutional tests, the Supreme Court was ready to hand down its final ruling in the case. And the verdict was clear and decisive. The Supreme Court reversed the lower appellate court's decision. Ordinance number 7774 of the City of Manila was officially struck down. It was declared unconstitutional. And the case leaves us with this powerful final thought. The court described the state as a leviathan, a massive, powerful beast that has to be restrained. While the government certainly has a role in promoting morality, that power has limits. And the ultimate takeaway here is a really crucial one for any free society. Even the best of intentions can't justify a law that needlessly intrudes upon our fundamental right to be let alone.